That much more human intelligence incorporated into a technology obviously impacts every industry, but oh my goodness, how that's going to impact marketing in terms of the creation of assets, the creation of strategies, but all the way to how do we truly understand the consumer, and will we be able to build really intelligent models with AGI that can help us pre-test and do all those other types of things.
Hello, and welcome to The Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Hingle. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, our CEO, and Rob DeMars, our Chief Product Architect.
Hey, y'all.
Hello there.
2023 getting in the rearview mirror here.
It's getting close.
We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. One quick plug before we get started, we did recently revamp our newsletter. So if you like the podcast, you'll love the newsletter. It contains our top learnings from the show in a short, skimmable weekly email. It's 100% focused on data and actionable takeaways. We tried to make a podcast we'd love as marketers ourselves, and now we're trying to do the same with the newsletter. So please subscribe at marketingarchitects.com/newsletter. Now, getting back to the show, our topic for today is 2024 marketing predictions. 2023 is almost over, so we're going to look to the future and talk about a few trends and topics we believe should be top of mind for marketers heading into next year. But before we share our opinions, I wanted to start with some research from Forrester. I found this article. It's part of their Predictions 2024 B2C marketing report, and it's called B2C Marketers Prioritize Practicality Over Purpose. Forrester believes it's back to basics for marketers in 2024. They're predicting the need for profitable growth that will put values-based marketing on hiatus. CMOs will favor practical marketing practices over purpose-led marketing campaigns, and they'll double down on marketing principles. However, this won't mean innovation won't be present. Generative AI will continue to dominate headlines, but next year we'll get practical, with true use cases for CMOs to improve their marketing functions with new creative capabilities, MarTech integrations, and operational efficiencies. Forrester predicts the CMO will be at the center of generative AI innovation. To quote directly from the article, if 2023 was the year of generative AI exploration, 2024 will be the year of generative AI experimentation. And the article ends with 3 specific predictions. The first, 9 in 10 U.S. mainstream brands will mute communications around social justice and ESG. For the first time in 4 years, there was a dip in U.S. adults who said they regularly purchase from brands that align with their personal values. The authors also said virtue signaling in our current climate is at best a risky business choice. Their second prediction was experience with generative AI will be written into 20% of new CMO job descriptions. Halfway through the year, 8 in 10 marketing executives in the US said they were exploring or using generative AI. And according to Forrester, if you haven't started integrating generative AI into your marketing creative processes, you're already behind. And then finally, their third prediction is that half of CMOs will pursue MarTech ecosystem integration over marketing cloud dreams. To operate technology all in one place, half of companies will pursue an ecosystem approach to MarTech by adopting new CDPs, predictive and generative AI, and cloud infrastructure, which will improve productivity for marketers. So we are going to get into our own predictions for next year. But first, Ange, I wanted to ask you, was there anything that stood out to you in that article?
Yeah, obviously AI was talked about quite a bit in this report. And one thing that surprised me was the prediction that enterprise AI initiatives will boost productivity and creative problem solving by 50%. And the part that surprised me was the 50%. I mean, I think if you've been experimenting and potentially even implementing AI already, that number starts to not make sense to you when you recognize the power. I know there are limitations. There are a lot of people looking at the legal implications, ethics, etc. So it's hard to understand, is that what's holding that number back? Because certainly when you look at just the tech capability, 50 feels pretty conservative, I would say. Did that jump out to you guys?
I would piggyback on that. I thought the word choice was interesting. You know, moving from exploration to experimentation, like to me, that's kind of the same thing versus implementation and actually putting AI into some of the best practices within an agency. I see that coming in 2024. So I felt like it was a little bit soft as well in terms of recognizing the impact.
I did think it was interesting. The headline was about practicality over purpose, and it does seem like there's themes of efficiency in all of these and getting back to principles, and can see how AI is going to fit really well into that if people are looking to be more efficient next year. I know there's still some concerns about the economy. It makes sense that, AI is kind of coming at an opportune time next year for more marketers to invest in it.
It does feel like we're just getting down to what's going to drive performance and drive growth. I think you see that with Bob Iger from Disney just recently claiming that Disney's going to quiet the noise, and the culture wars, just coming to grips with what they've been dealing with and just having to go, okay, we need to make some decisions here because we're struggling in comparison to where we want to be.
It does feel like 2023 was the first year as well where we saw kind of the reverse backlash of adding a more social consciousness into the marketing. Obviously, we saw that with Target as well. Mm-hmm. It feels like the first time that I can remember where it's actually gone backwards on marketers. So you can see, folks trying to be more cautious moving into next year with those strategies.
Mark Pritchard at P&G, didn't they have a recent huge announcement about that, about how they're going to move away from brand purpose with the majority of their brands? So it's definitely a lot of marketers are feeling the same about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's happened in 2023, what Forrester thinks is going to happen next year. I thought it might be fun to give our own predictions, and there's a lot we could talk about going into next year. So I challenge all of us to pick just one topic that we're passionate about. And I called dibs on this one first. So I'm going to kick us off. My prediction is 2024 is the year marketing effectiveness will become a priority for US marketers. So, okay, first, to start my argument, I wanted to define just, is there a problem with effectiveness in the US? I think that the three of us definitely feel like there's some lag in the US around effectiveness, just people not being maybe as aware of like some of the marketing effectiveness principles that we've been diving into. And we've been talking about that for a while now. I've seen people talking about it on LinkedIn. And then a few weeks ago, Mark Ritson published an article called Effectiveness Ignorance Has Left American Marketing Lagging Behind the Rest of the World. And I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's happening. The subtitle of that was America's Marketing Influence is Diminishing Because of a Failure to Apply the Concepts of Effectiveness that have served marketers in other countries so well. And that article, I really encourage everybody to read it. It's really interesting. And Ritson is definitely not someone who's down on the marketing that comes out of the US or the marketers that are here. He spent a lot of time in the US, so I think that he offers a interesting perspective. I was thinking more about, okay, why is America kind of behind? One theory I have is that it's just harder for us to produce marketing research. I know that in the UK, it's just a smaller country. Maybe it's easier to kind of popularize different studies. The US is so big. It's such a giant country. It's got a lot of different diverse people, just going from one side of the US to the other. So maybe it's been harder for us to produce research that can be applied broadly. My other theory that I haven't heard a lot of other people talk about, but I've been thinking more about, is that we've really pioneered digital marketing. And that's been a great thing for the US, but I also think it's caused a lot of US marketers to be brought up more on short-termism, measure the impact of marketing immediately. And it gets really easy to fall into those digital practices. And maybe it's taken us a little bit further away from the long-term marketing. Like, we're really great at performance marketing, at digital, which is not a bad thing, but we've maybe focused there a little bit more since a lot of it originated in the US.
That is interesting. And let's face it, Americans can't agree on anything. So, just in general.
To your point, a lot of us that are in marketing have grown up learning our quote unquote craft from whatever brand or agency that we might be working for. And so I think you've got a lot more groupthink that goes on. My perspective could be wrong, is that overseas marketing has been more of an empirical craft that has been built over time. And there's a lot more education centered around it as well, versus we've been over in the US a little more test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. And I think that cycles back to the short-termism, right? We want to do what we can see, what we can learn from, and do more of it. And that is inherently part of the challenge of marketing effectiveness, is that not all of that impact happens immediately. So then what do you do about that? I think we've liked to be really smart with our data, and there's a lot of data in the US. There's a lot of big data houses that have very impactful evidence and data for marketers to use, but that shouldn't be it.
So I think we all agree that it's been lacking a little bit, but the reason I think it's going to become a priority next year is you can definitely feel the popularity growing. Like, it's more of a topic on LinkedIn. There are a few thought leaders in the US that are starting to speak more on effectiveness, like Fergus O'Carroll. He's the host of the On Strategy Showcase podcast. He talks a lot about effectiveness in the US, and he invites a lot of people on his show to talk about those principles. We're big fans of the B2B Institute that's funded by LinkedIn, and I think they're leading the way for B2B marketers in effectiveness. And even Work, which Work's international, but I've noticed they've had more of a focus on the US, and I know that they agree with us that there's something lacking there. So it feels like things are kind of starting to bubble up. People are talking about it more. We're trying to talk about it more. But the real reason I think it's going to become more of a priority next year is out of necessity. I think, as we learned from that Forrester article, there's going to be this return to more practical marketing. And I also think that changes are going to continue in the digital marketing landscape. We've talked a lot about the privacy changes, and that combined with AI, like, there's just so much change. And marketers are returning to being practical. They're returning to principles and what works. And I think that might naturally lead them back to marketing effectiveness. Also, we've talked about the Airbnb story on the podcast before, that they were very invested in short-termism, performance marketing. All of a sudden, they start investing in brand. They start to see these like longer-term impacts. I'm starting to wonder, there's a lot of marketers, brands in the US that have been very focused on the short term and performance marketing. And that works for a while. But when does it start to catch up? And like, when are marketers going to have to pivot? And it feels like, especially, and again, with everything changing in digital and with AI, it's going to be harder to differentiate. Like, it's going to be easier for people to put together performance marketing campaigns. So I think that 2024 could be the year that we're forced into effectiveness.
Do you think there's a macro force at play that's getting marketers to feel like they need to be more practical beyond just the pendulum shift of one trend to another? Because if you look at the market in general has been doing pretty well. So it's not like we're in I suppose you could argue whether or not we're in a state of correction, but what is it that's drawing marketers' hearts to be more practical right now?
I would think that just one aspect of it in general is that if you are unaware of Ehrenberg Bass, of the IPA, of Lesbinet, Peterfield, and many others, you don't have answers as to why you reach that diminishing return. You just start to go, there's with my short-term approach, which of course you're not thinking about as short-term, you're just thinking, I'm a savvy digital marketer growing my brand, and diminishing returns happen in any channel. And so you start to reach that point and go, okay, I've reached saturation. There's no more to grow. I have to look to other ways to potentially continue to grow my brand. Then you come upon a different perspective as to how to grow brands. And you go, okay, we've got people that are in market, and then we've got the idea of creating future demand, which I think the US has been not opposed to, I wouldn't say, but we've all thought of it as brand awareness and building familiarity. And a lot of digital marketers, including us, honestly, like years and years back, I would have said that's a really expensive way to try to grow your brand. And what's going to come from that? How would you ever know? Now, having been further along in this, we know that there are ways to try to quantify, share of search shifts, share of market shifts, things like that, that really, really matter. Pricing power, things like that, that matter a lot more than what's the CAC I drove yesterday out of my digital channel or even out of television. And so because it is a growing body and a growing topic in the marketing industry, and some of that is being pulled over from overseas, marketers in the US are starting to go, oh, maybe that's what's going on with my brand. And maybe there is a perspective that I haven't had that I need to think about.
I also think, Rob, in particular, the brand purpose stuff, I feel like it's almost like a pendulum and it just swung way too far. Brands started to have a purpose that's like, I literally could not care less about this thing of yogurt. Like, why is it like in my face about this? So I think there's a big swing. And then I think maybe that's why also we're going to see a big correction next year.
I heard Scott Galloway talk on this topic not too long ago, and he went way to the other side of the pendulum, where he was like, look, if you sit on the board of a company that makes chicken sandwiches, you don't have the right to be making claims about social justice. Like, that does not qualify you for that topic. So it was definitely an interesting perspective and definitely on the far end of the other side.
Well, I took up way too much time with that. So let's move on to Rob. Rob, what's your 2024 prediction?
All right. So I think we would all agree that the two most valuable letters in the English language of 2023 were AI. And I think for 2024, it's going to be three letters. It's going to be AGI. And AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. The news is just starting to percolate on this right now, and I think it's going to get hot and heavy next year. You know, what's the difference between AI and AGI? Well, AI is generally considered narrow AI or weak AI, which means it can solve particular problems. AGI is the next level, where it's actually starting to solve its own problems. It's considered generalized human cognitive abilities within software, which is going to open up all kinds of new opportunities and debates next year. Now, some people have theorized that AGI is like 10 years away, and we're already seeing advancements within Meta's Llama 3. Google has Gemini coming out next year, and OpenAI has had all kinds of crazy news happen lately with Sam Altman leaving and then coming back. And a lot of that raised speculation around Q Star, which is supposedly an internal project, which they feel may have reached AGI, and that really freaked out the board. It's all rumor and speculation, but certainly interesting. In addition to that, all of this has to be powered by chips. And NVIDIA is supposedly releasing a chip next year, which is 12 times as powerful as its current model. So it really feels like this convergence where we're going to transition from just talking about AI to AGI. So that's my prediction.
Rob, how do you think that marketers should be thinking about that? Because I know marketers are already feeling like we're behind. We're trying to keep up with AI. AGI, like, how will that change things for marketers?
I think that much more human intelligence incorporated into a technology obviously impacts every industry, but oh my goodness, how that's going to impact marketing. When you just think about the human side of what marketing does in terms of the creation of assets, the creation of strategies, but all the way to the other end of the spectrum is how do we truly understand the consumer? And will we be able to build really intelligent models with AGI that can help us pre-test and do all those other types of things? I mean, obviously consumer data is a huge asset. And if we can truly replicate it using AGI, I think the potential is limitless.
One of the other predictions in the Forrester report was that AI processing is going to hit a wall next year, which feels like we just got started, right? But it's driven by limited chip availability. So if you're right, Rob, you know, what impact will that have? It'll be interesting to see.
It's why you see the unique partnerships. You go, why is OpenAI so interested in Microsoft, right? Why don't they just do it on their own? Well, they don't have the computing power to be able to run those kind of models. So we may see even more unique partnerships form as well.
I think they also like to have the drama kept to OpenAI instead of Microsoft too.
Well, they've done a good job this year with that.
One thing that did stand out to me in the Forrester article was that they're predicting that the CMO will be at the center of AI transformation. And as someone who leads marketing, I was like, ooh, okay, gotta stand up with that.
As if the CMO doesn't have enough to tackle.
Right. Let's just add that on. Thanks, Rob. Not surprised you chose AI, but a good one. Angela, bring us home. What's your 2024 prediction?
Yeah, mine plays on yours, Elena, a bit. I just think that the more that marketing effectiveness practices spread and become a priority for the US, the more we're going to see marketers try to rebalance their investments to support a greater blend of that future demand generation versus existing demand capture, which is going to just lead to increased percentages of spend going to top of funnel channels like TV, CTV, even radio. Not shockingly, CTV is going to grow quite a bit, 20 to 30%, I think, of this next year. But I think what a lot of marketers might find shocking is that linear TV is also projected to grow. It's just a little baby growth, but it's still growing in 2024. You know, marketers are going to have political to contend with in 2024. But even so, I think we're going to see more brands seriously consider top of funnel channels that in prior years they may not have.
I think if you asked marketers, do you think linear TV is going to grow or shrink next year? A very small number would have said.
Totally.
It's
being propped up a bit by about a forecast of, I think, 10 billion in political spending. But yes, still projected to grow.
I mean, still, a lot of people think that it's not even a channel anymore. Yeah. Well, I thought it might be fun to end the episode with some very specific predictions, because then we can go back next year and see, was anyone right? And whoever's wrong gets kicked off the podcast. No, just kidding. So I think, here's my prediction. I think that by the end of next year, there will be a clear marketing effectiveness thought leader in America.
Ooh.
When you ask people today, like, hey, who's the leader in, if you ask people out of Australia, it's like, oh, well, Byron Sharp. There's no one really in the United States. And I think by the end of the year, there's going to be somebody who we're looking to as the leader.
Rob, do you think we should pin her down to who it is?
Ooh.
That's a harder prediction. Yeah.
All right. We won't put you on the spot.
I think it's more likely to be you than me, honestly.
I have two predictions. The first one is that I will be kicked off the podcast by the end of next year. And then the second one being, I'm going to combine my two favorite topics, which is Apple and AI. And right now, Apple has been completely out of the conversation as it relates to AI. And I believe they are in the basement of Cupertino planning something big. And they better be, because Siri is like a 4-year-old that doesn't listen very well. I think they are too big and too powerful in the tech community. And they have a history of being secretive and then unleashing big news. So I predict by the end of the year, next year, we'll be going, wow, okay, Apple has their hat in the ring.
Rob, what do you love more, Apple or AI?
Apple. I still love Apple in all forms. It's just, it touches too many aspects of my life. So
the amount of data that Apple has on you, Rob, is scary to me.
I will give them all of my info because it just makes my life better. So they are welcome to anything.
All right, Angela, what about you?
I think, ironically, that we're going to see your prediction, Elena, about marketing effectiveness and Rob's prediction of the growth of AI. I think we're going to see them collide. There's going to be a little marketing effectiveness AI rumble, and this is why. If marketing effectiveness takes off, as you're predicting, you're going to see a lot of brands, I think, lean back from hyper targeting and lean towards more sophisticated mass marketing, emphasis of reaching all potential buyers, heavy, light, bullseye, secondary, tertiary. And, one of the foundational principles of proven marketing success is that reach is the primary driver of growth. So you have that on one side. Meanwhile, the growth of AI driven marketing is going to lead marketers towards the desire to hyper personalize creative messaging and deliver that message through hyper targeted media buying practices, which flies directly in the face of this empirical evidence of what drives brand growth. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a AI marketing effectiveness showdown.
Nice.
Good prediction. Well, sounds like it's definitely going to be a lot of change again in 2024, but marketers are no strangers to change. So if there's anyone who should be ready to go tackle everything that's going to happen next year, it should be marketers. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Claphockey for producing the show and Michael Hingle for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find our show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
I think we lost Angela.
You lost me. What do you mean?
You guys
I can
don't.
see Angela.
Oh, she's like a beacon. She's like a picture of like a Wi-Fi signal.
I'm seeing her. Like,
Well, then never mind.
That sounds
Maybe
like
it's
a you problem, Rob.
It's probably a Rob problem. Just the story of my life.